friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name's Amanda. So today I'm really excited to bring you some comfort food, some southern recipes from Loretta Lynn's cookbook. And also this is part of a collab hosted by Tamara at Southern Life, Everyday Life. So make sure you check out her channel. I'll have it linked below in the description box as well as the entire playlist. Lots of yummy recipes. I don't know about y'all, but I have tons of cookbooks and I never use them. I always go to the internet or Pinterest, you know, something like that. So definitely it's good to break out the cookbooks and use them again. I'm really excited to share these recipes from Loretta Lynn's cookbook. It's good Southern home style cooking. So we've got a couple different dinner recipes, and then I also made her favorite chocolate pie. So this pie, if you've seen the movie, so got the DVD here. If you've seen Coal Miner's Daughter, you'll know that part where she makes the pie and she uses salt instead of sugar. And so that's a pretty funny story. And actually, I one time left out sugar out of a pie, so that can go bad when you do that too. But I'll be showing you all these recipes, so let's get to it.
First, we're going to start with chicken and dumplings. That's a favorite for every Southerner, I think, especially, and I'm sure even if you're not Southern and you've ever had chicken and dumplings, it's just so good. So the recipe actually called for like a hen, like a whole chicken. I actually just used 4 chicken breasts, and that worked just fine for us. Now I'm adding just some salt and pepper in here. I've got the 3 cloves of garlic. I'm just going to boil this for a couple of hours. Just going to create a broth, and then also, as well as cooking the chicken, I'm just going to remove that and shred all that chicken up. Now also with the broth, I actually like to strain my broth just to make sure that there's no bits of bone or anything like that that get kind of broken off from the chicken, because when you're cooking it for a couple hours like that, it does kind of break down a little bit more. Also, I forgot to get footage of this, but as I was cooking it, I did skim the impurities that rose to the top, and that also helped skim off a lot of the extra grease from the fat from the chicken too. So that was really handy as well. So I encourage you to do that as well. And I'm just picking this meat off and getting it ready. I actually ended up with quite a bit more than I needed for this recipe, so I went ahead and saved the rest of it for another use. So that was really handy too, to have some extra chicken cooked up. So here's my strained broth, and now we're going to get ready to make these dumplings. So I've got 3 cups of all-purpose flour, or I'm sorry, self-rising flour in that bowl, and I'm just adding a cup of water and an egg to it. I have made dumplings maybe once or twice before, and I've actually never made the dumplings this way with the egg in it, so this was a new way to try out for me for sure. And you're just going to get it, to come together until you can get it to where you can kind of start kneading it a little. And of course, you always want to make sure you don't overwork your dough, but you're going to put a little flour down and then just kind of get that dough out there and knead it just a little bit to get it to come fully together, and work in any little extra flour that you might need. And then we're going to roll it out. Now, I have to say again, I've mentioned it before, I love that dough whisk. I've seen a few different YouTubers use that, and so I thought, oh, I'm going to try me one of those. It looked really handy, and it is really awesome. I love that thing. And once I get this kind of, worked in to where it's ready to roll out, I'm actually going to take my Pampered Chef roller tool. I don't remember what it's called, but I love that thing too. It's really handy. I like that it's dishwasher safe, because rolling pins usually are wood and you can't really plop them in the dishwasher. So I really like that you can just put that in the dishwasher too. So I'm going to get this rolled out. I like thin dumplings. How about y'all? If y'all have had dumplings, do you like the thin ones? Do you like the thick ones? Do you like drop dumplings? And do you make them like, how do you normally like your dumplings? I like the really thin ones. I love Cracker Barrel's dumplings. Oh my gosh, they're like my favorite. And so I was trying to get these kind of thinner so I could maybe get them kind of like Cracker Barrels. Now, I will have to say every now and then I'll get really big chunks like a Cracker Barrel or something like that. But mostly they're, when they're nice and fresh, especially, they're nice and thin. And I'm just taking a little spatula here and cutting these. I thought about using, if you have maybe like a butcher block countertop or something where you could do more on, a pizza cutter would be a great tool to use for this. It would make it so easy. But I have a texture on my countertop, and I didn't know whether that might mess it up, so I thought I'd use the spatula instead. Now, as I do this, I am kind of you know, dusting a little flour just so they don't stick together. I'm kind of making me a little pile of dumplings over there. And so make sure you do that as you roll out, you know, cut out these dumplings so that they don't start sticking together. Plus that flour actually will help a little bit on thickening up the dumpling, like the liquid in the dumplings too. So, and that kind of helps a little to have that extra flour. I think I have seen, I know that I watch Colorado Valley Cooks, and I've watched her make dumplings before, and I think she a lot of times even takes a little flour at the end and, like, you know, kind of tosses them in it and stuff. So you could definitely do that as well. So I've brought my chicken broth back to a boil, and I'm just going to drop all these in. I got a little scared. The pot got kind of full, so I didn't drop them all in. I will tell you, it was absolutely fine. It would have been completely fine to drop them all in. Now I wished I would have, because we kind of didn't end up having as many dumplings as I would have liked. But, and I'm just adding a little bit of that chicken bouillon here to kind of flavor it, since I left the salt out of the additional salt out of the dumplings. So I thought that might taste good and kind of enhance the chicken broth flavor. And I've just got my chicken going in here. And now this is where you're going to kind of watch it for thickness. And of course, some people like their dumplings really soupy. Some people like them a lot more thicker. So I've got some cream going in there. That's going to help thicken it up as well. And then mine still wasn't quite thick enough, so I went ahead and made like a cornstarch slurry, and just a little bit of cornstarch and some of the cooking liquid. Mixed that together, and that helped. But I probably could have took it even a little more. I didn't want to get it too thick, so I was kind of careful about that, because like I said, I'm not really an expert at making dumplings. So this was kind of maybe my third attempt. So these were amazing. They tasted so good. The dumplings were had this like chewiness to them that were so delicious. I will definitely be making this again. So next up, we have corn chowder and corn fritters. So I'm going to get started chopping my potatoes, and while I do that, I actually want to mention something about the previous recipe. So Loretta Lynn, in her cookbook, she talks about that when she first made, chicken and dumplings, that her husband threw them out. Like she couldn't cook. She was so young. And that's one thing that I find neat about her cookbook. She adds a lot of personal stories. And if you've ever seen Coal Miner's Daughter, that kind of gives you an insight too into like her life and their marriage and things like that. So definitely recommend that movie if you haven't seen it. So I've got all these potatoes chopped up, and I'm going to add 4 cups of water and a bay leaf and get those to boiling. And while those cook, we're going to get started on chopping the veggies for this soup too. I've actually never made corn chowder before, but we really love this. These are both, the chicken and dumplings and the corn chowder both are like such cozy winter recipes. Like they just make you want to just, curl up on the couch with a bowl and, and eat and just stay cozy and warm. So I'm just chopping up this pepper. The recipe actually calls for 1 whole green pepper. It also calls for some onions and celery. I actually already had some celery, you can see there in that little bowl, that I had cut up already and frozen in the freezer. So that was really handy to pull that out. And the recipe called for 3 medium onions. I had 3 onions set aside there, as you can see, but I didn't use quite all of them because it seemed like that was going to be an awful lot of onions. And I do love onions, but it seemed like it was going to be kind of overwhelming amount of them. So I thought, well, I'll cut back a little on that. So I didn't use quite 3. And it's always hard to tell what somebody's medium is. So I kind of felt like, probably cut them back just a little. So this actually calls for you to drain these potatoes and reserve that liquid. So that's why I'm kind of scooping them out here. And of course you discard that bay leaf. And then you set aside that liquid because we're going to actually add that back later. So make sure to do that. And then once we get all those scooped out, we're going to, and the pot emptied, we're going to start building kind of our base to our soup. So I've just got some butter going in here. And then I'm going to add all our veggies. So we've got that onion, the celery, the green pepper going in there. And we're just going to saute all that and just cook it until the veggies get tender. Now the recipe actually called for cumin seeds. I didn't have cumin seeds, and I didn't really want to I didn't think I would use them that much, so I didn't really want to buy them for this. So I read online that you could actually substitute cumin, like ground cumin seeds, which is, cumin powder, in place of that. You just need to use a lot smaller amount. So I did use I believe it was like a 1/4 teaspoon or something like that. It's a very small amount. And so I'm actually just going ahead and cutting up the green onions. This will be for the corn fritters. That way I can have that done while everything else is cooking. I think green onions just add such a bright flavor to stuff, so that they were really, good in this. So in here I've just got my seasonings, my flour going in here, some pepper, some sage, the cumin, all that good stuff. And it tells you just to add a little bit of the water to make a paste. So just kind of let that cook out a little bit. And that's what I did. I kind of cooked that, get that flour taste out of it. And then we add back the rest of that reserved liquid from where we boiled our potatoes. I was really kind of surprised. I almost expected this to call for chicken broth, and I almost used chicken broth to boil the potatoes. But to be honest, it still had a lot of good flavor once we added some additional seasoning. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So it really didn't have to have the chicken broth, but I think that would be a tasty addition also to use chicken broth in place. So I'm just adding a couple of cups of milk. And this is again where I was like a little worried. I was like, is this going to be enough liquid? But it really worked out great. Like, it was perfect. I was really surprised. Now I'm just adding the corn, and that's really your last step. You're just going to bring that kind of, heat all that through. And once it's heated through, it's good to go. So while we let that heat, we're going to get to work on our corn fritters. Now I will say the recipe actually called for some yellow pepper salsa. I didn't make that just since I was eating it with the soup, but we've got some cornmeal going in here and some all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, all that kind of stuff. So just those seasonings, kind of making that cornmeal type mix up. And then we're going to add in some liquid ingredients. We've got some eggs going in here, some melted butter, milk. And this actually called for canned corn instead. And I'm sure you probably could use frozen. I just went ahead and used canned just since it said to use canned. And of course you drain that, and then that way you add that to it. And it really came together very quickly. You're going to also add in those green onions we chopped earlier. Now I accidentally added them to some green peppers I had left over. And I saw here I'm trying to kind of scoop them out and not put too many green peppers in there. I did get a few in there, but they were fine. And so we're just mixing this together and getting it ready. Now I've got a cast iron skillet that I'm preheating over medium heat. And then I'm going to add some oil to that and just cook these up. These really cooked easily. The big thing is that I had to remember I started making them too big. So I kind of cut that out because they were way too big and they totally kind of flopped everywhere. But once I realized that the recipe did say to drop them by tablespoons, I was like, oh, okay, that makes much more sense. Oh, and the corn liked to get stuck in the whisk there, so I had to shake that out there. But once I got all that done, I just dropped them by tablespoonfuls, and that worked so much better. So it's always a good thing to try to remember to read the recipe through. I'm bad about that sometimes, and I'm also bad about getting distracted and trying to do everything at one time that I kind of, miss instructions or something like that. So definitely always pay attention to your recipe, because my mess up at the beginning of making them too big would have been avoided if I'd have paid more attention. So we're just cooking them for a couple minutes on each side till they get golden brown and flipping them, and we do the whole batter, whole batter that way. Now here's the corn chowder, and then we've got the corn fritters down there. These were really good. That soup was amazing. I will say it needed a little bit more seasoning. I added a little garlic salt to mine, and it was perfect. We really enjoyed that recipe. So next up we have Loretta's favorite chocolate pie. So I've just got a prepared pie shell here, and I'm just pricking it to make little holes so it doesn't bubble up on me. I actually went ahead and baked both of them that was in the package, because I may use the other one for another pie, because this recipe actually was for 2 pies, but I wasn't sure if we would eat 2 pies, so I went ahead and just made one, and then I thought I'll use the other shell for something else. So now we're building the chocolate filling. While those are baking, I'm just adding in a cup of sugar, 2.5 tablespoons of cornstarch, a cup of milk, 1.5 tablespoons of butter. Now it called for a dash of salt, but I went ahead and used salted butter, so I didn't end up using the salt since the butter had that in it. And 1/4 cup of cocoa. So you're basically almost making kind of like a chocolate pudding. We tasted this after it got done. It was so good. Oh my goodness, so very good. So I would make this even just as like pudding But you just want to whisk it really well to try to get all those, you know, lumps broke up and bring it to a boil and kind of let it thicken. Now the recipe didn't really, it just said to cook it over medium heat. It didn't go into it much, but you're just really going to want it to be thickened like a pudding. So once that got done, we went ahead and poured that into the pie shell and got that finished. Now we're going to kind of work on our meringue. I actually have only made meringue maybe a time or two before. I want to say maybe just once. So I was hoping that would turn out, because it's one of those things that I just haven't made much. And it is meringue, kind of, you have to be kind of particular about it. I've watched enough cooking, you know, Food Network and stuff like that to kind of know that you have to be careful about not getting the yellows in it and things like that. So I've just got 3 egg whites here. And I'm going to add some powdered sugar and a little bit of cream of tartar to this. I wanted to make sure you kind of could see some of the stages as it went through. So I kind of take you through. It is, you know, meringue is like one of those things. I'm just not real experienced with it. So I was really hoping this would turn out. And it did. It got to the, you know, because you want it to stiff peaks, and it got to that. So when it gets to that, you can kind of see it's very thick. Like, you know, it won't just drop from the whisk. So that's kind of when you know it's to that point. So just make sure you watch that if you know, make meringue. I just want to tell y'all, this pie was amazing. Like, I've never had a homemade like chocolate pie with meringue topping like that. It was so good. I cannot recommend this recipe enough. It was delicious. And if you know the movie Coal Miner's Daughter, you know, I mentioned it in my intro, you know, she accidentally used salt when she made it. And she tells about that whole story in her cookbook too. So that was really, really fun to read about too. Now I've just added some vanilla in here. That made me a little nervous. I was afraid I would break the meringue. I wasn't sure. Like I said, I'm not very experienced with meringue, but it turned out fine. And we didn't use all of this for it. We're not huge meringue people. I know some people like to make it really, you know, really high, but we just used some of it for that. And then we baked it in the 350-degree oven. The recipe said 8 minutes. I let it go a little longer. I wanted to make sure the egg whites got completely done. But again, so very good. Highly recommend this. And here's a piece of it sliced. We kind of cut it before it set up fully, but it was delicious. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I'd appreciate it if you'd give me a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to have you as part of my YouTube family. Also, make sure you check out that playlist below and Tamara's channel, Southern Wife, Everyday Life. And I just really cannot wait to see all these cookbook videos. I hope y'all check them out too. So all that'll be linked in the description box. And I hope y'all have a blessed day wherever you are. And thank you so much for joining me. See you in the next one.